It's another excellent night down at Crypto Cove. Hello, everyone. How are you doing? All righty, good, good. We got thumbs up all around. That's good to see. Good to see. All right, so folks, as I explained before we started, we have a couple different topics to go over tonight. The first one, the headline topic, is I'm going to be talking a bit about the listings I have on the MyJoy marketplace, as well as highlighting a couple that I think are going to be key for this call and in the future. And then we're going to be going over updates to my toolbox because version 2.2 just launched a few days ago. Then we're going to have a quick talk about sustainability once again. And yep, we're going to get some updates on that. And then after that, we're going to go through a Q&A session. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump right in. All right, and as some of you may have noticed on Mr. Gilda's his call, on his last call, that I've actually reigned supreme insofar as the catalog of entries that I have listed on the MyJoy marketplace. I have 9 listings so far on the marketplace, and there's more to come, definitely. And we're going to be talking about a few of those tonight. Let's just go over to the marketplace itself so you can see what that looks like in the overview. We've had a couple others put certain items and listings on the marketplace, but for the most part, it's been mostly me doing this, other than a couple notable people in the community. So I appreciate those of you who have stepped up so far, and for those of you that haven't yet, what are you waiting on? I'm tired of having top billing. Right, so with that, we'll go into a couple key listings I have on the marketplace that I think are going to become more important as time goes on. The first one that comes to mind is a community gas station wallet. Now, I'm going to have a link to this in the Zoom chat as well as in the description, but I definitely do want to talk about this a bit. Now, who here has had this issue happen to them or happen to one of the folks that they've been onboarding or one of the referrals or anyone that's anywhere at all on your team whatsoever? They got the USDT just fine, but it turns out that they got USDT on the Ethereum blockchain. That's definitely been a major pain point, especially with those just coming into the community. And there's definitely a couple more things that this will be positioned to help stop or at least prevent in some form. The second thing is that some people just might not pay too much attention at all to the BNB that they have left in their wallets until it gets to the point where they have no BNB left in their wallet. So nothing to use for transactions since everything requires BNB to serve as the gas fee. So it's a problem that if you're not paying attention, you just might not know until it's really too late for you to do anything yourself about. Usually that would require you to purchase some more BNB, even if you have plenty of USDT to go around. Whereas with the solution I have in mind here, which I'll be going over in just a minute, that may no longer be the case. And the third situation I have in mind that the gas station vault will help with is in cases where train of thought just left me. We're live, folks. All right, so the last thing that this will absolutely help with is a forgotten gas reserve because, some people, especially those that come into the community who have already used Binance or another exchange that does in fact support the USDT we use, that being USDT BP20. Now, they may get that just fine, but in some cases, they might forget to get some BNB to go along with it to use for the gas fee. So we've got three situations where someone could become stuck, requiring them to spend funds to get themselves out. And especially in the case of folks that are either crypto newbies in general or just new to our community, that can be a major source of friction for people. And that can definitely cause a big issue with the user experience. So, are we all in agreement that we should strive to do something about that sort of issue? Alrighty. So, uh,
Possible.
yeah. Alrighty. So, my solution to the problem is really quite simple. And in the course of doing so, I also give the community the opportunity to help fundraise for that solution. And that solution is a dedicated wallet that I will operate and maintain. And what this wallet will do is it will contain the native gas tokens for popular chains on the EVM, as well as some other chains such as the Tron chain or the Solana chain. And how it will work is if someone contacts me, either through they themselves or through a member of the executive team or even the sponsor themselves, I can then manually dispense a bit of the gas fee to the person who needs the gas, just enough for them to do one or two transactions or a or perhaps a swap. You get the idea. Basically enough to help them get out of whatever situation that they find themselves in. So I see this as something that would help with all three issues. So honestly, I can definitely say that it's something that we all should work for. And how I have it listed in the market right now is that it's essentially a donation of $5 worth of joy. And right now that's a fixed $5, although if there's enough interest in it, I may put forth another entry that will serve as a sort of choose your own donation type of thing. And I may also decide to put forth a monthly donation offering for this as well. All proceeds that I get in the form of joy from the gas fee fundraiser will go towards that other waltz because the joy will ultimately be swapped into the native gas tokens for several popular chains. Like, for example, with the Ethereum mainnet, we have Ethereum as the native gas token. For the Binance Smart Chain, we of course have BNB. For the Avalanche Seed Chain, we of course have Avalanche or AVAX as it's called. For Solana, we naturally have Solana. For the Tron chain, we have Tron. And I definitely do want us to get to a good buffer in that as well. So that way, if someone ends up getting tokens on a less popular chain, then we have a good chance to just swap some to that chain's native gas token right away to send them. All right. So what do you think, Holt? Does that sound like a good idea? Alrighty, and I'll go ahead and put a link to the chat to that listing for anyone who wants to take a look at it for themselves. And I'll just quickly go through the listing here for the folks watching on YouTube. And to be clear, folks, this initiative has nothing at all to do with the toolbox. This is something entirely separate that I thought of. All right, so are there any questions about that before we move on to the next key item that I have here in the market?
No, you can continue.
All right, I'll go ahead and share my screen again. And the second key item that I put in the marketplace is a walled approval and permission check. Now, some of you may be familiar with this somewhat because I have an automated version of this over on the Toolbox. Now, what this scanner actually does is it checks your walled approvals against lists of known bad approvals, like for example, with smart contracts that's already known to be malicious or phishing in nature. And typically, these will be those that have been known for quite some time, typically. And you may also know that I do offer something very similar, and in fact, pretty much the exact same thing in the premium Web3 support services section of the toolbox. And indeed, this is exactly the same thing. This goes through the exact same process. I've pretty much just forwarded it over to the marketplace so that if you're interested in the products, you can pay with Joy if you'd like, or you can contact me directly if you want to pay with USDT. So you've definitely got options. And ultimately what ultimately what this ends up serving as is essentially a checkup of sorts of the approvals that you've given to particular websites or tokens. Because if you've spent a bit of time in Web3 in any form, chances are you probably have some approvals floating around that you might not be fully aware of right now. And the issue with that is that those approvals don't automatically expire typically. In some cases they do through a hard-coded limit, but in a lot of cases we've seen that several approvals just languish there, not getting used for all but maybe once or twice if you're using the service. So, like for example, the MetaMask swap router does require some approvals. So if you started with that and you graduated, as it were, to using Pancake Swap, which we all recommend, then chances are you still have that approval that you gave the MetaMask portfolio in order to make swaps. Now, this technically isn't really too much of an issue, especially on the case of MetaMask, and especially if you're using reputable services. But the time may come to pass that some sort of vulnerability occurs with one of the approvals that you've given to the point where something that was completely fine when you started using it may very well become malicious later on. And with the advent of some approvals that can have approval for up to unlimited amounts of a token you have in your wallet, you might find yourself having your wallet drained of one particular token or another, or even USDT for that matter, and you may be none the wiser until it's too late. So that's what the service is for, to try and hopefully surface a problem like that before it becomes a problem. And I actually have two versions of this. There's one just being a one-time check, and the other, which I've also put on the market, is a standing order for a monthly wallet approval and permission check. And this one is a subscription purchase for $10 worth of Joy for a month, similar in nature to the standard approval and permission check. And we're actually doing a drawing for this call for a one-time wallet approval and permission check. So, folks, if you go ahead and put your wallet addresses into the chat, I'll be doing that drawing after the call, and I'll be anonymizing the addresses, then pick one lucky winner. So I have the chat open. Folks, you can go ahead and start inputting your wallet addresses now. And in the meantime, I'll go ahead and input the link to the wallet approval permission check for anyone who decides that they just want to buy it outright. And indeed, I will also have a link to that in the video description as well for those of you watching on YouTube. Right. And if you win, folks, I'll contact the winner on Telegram, and I'll definitely fulfill the wallet approval check within 24 to 48 hours. Or if you decide that you want me to hold off on it to a later date, I'm completely fine with that as well. We'll just give it a few minutes before moving on. In the meantime, does anyone have any questions about that service? Alrighty. Okay, so let me go ahead and share my screen again. And now we're going to move on to talking about the toolbox. For those of you who don't know, version 2.2 of the toolbox has been launched. It was launched just a couple days ago. And there's several improvements and enhancements that have been made, as well as a couple new things. So we're just going to go through them here. Let me go ahead and scroll back up to my list here. All right, so the first change that I made, and this really isn't one that's going to be visible to anyone unless you're the type to click on view paid source, is a fun activity. But what I've done is I've expanded the fallback list for my wallet approval scanner. So just in case the Go Plus security module, which we rely on for mainline scanning, decides to conk out for whatever reason, then we at least have a fallback that we can use that can be shifted to you gracefully. And that at least helps make sure that you don't have some of the most common issues associated with approvals. All right, so the second change that has been made is I've added a monthly funding goal chart and demarcation here. This goes based off of the folks that have decided to sponsor the Toolbox monthly, and I do actually have a part of that over in the MyJoy marketplace. Let me just go over to that now. And looks like someone else has started putting something on there as well. All right, so this sponsorship is for 10 USDT worth of joy per month. And any proceeds I get from sponsorships go directly towards the upkeep of the toolbox, as well as eventually growing it out in some of the ways that I want to grow it out. More on that in a little while. So far we've had one person step up and become a subscriber. And for those of you who decide to sponsor the toolbox, we actually have a nice little perk for you. We've I created a new page called Toolbox Sponsors in the navigation drop down here. And if we go to that page, we'll see that there's nothing yet because I reached out to the person who's decided to sponsor the toolbox and asked them if they wanted to have their name, their handle, as well as a short quote up here if they wanted. They noted that they might want to, but I'm still waiting to hear back from them as far as what all they want in here, whether it's just their name, their handle, and or short quotes. But there is a sponsor indeed, but right now this section is pretty much empty, so it's prime real estate for whoever wants to sponsor the toolbox. All right, so we'll go ahead and go back. All right, and the third change that I've made is I've added latency testing to the RPC nodes listed in my RPC switcher. So now you have a better idea of which one to switch to when the one you're currently using has some sort of issue with it or is offline entirely, like we see here with Llama RPC. This function's based off of a red light, yellow light, green light sort of thing. So if you see red here in the milliseconds, then you might not want to switch to that RPC node unless you're given a specific instruction to. Ones in yellow are not going to be the fastest, but they're going to be okay. And if you see one green, or in this case, we see two in green, then those are the best ones to switch to for you. So now you have a bit better an idea as to which RPC node to switch to if something is going wrong with the one you're using for whatever reason. And bear in mind, folks, that these numbers are not set in stone. There's definitely going to be times where you're going to see at least one or two of these that normally are fast. Generally, the fastest among here, you'll see that they have timed out or have gone inactive entirely. And you also see times where there are some that are typically the slowest turn into the fastest. It's all a matter based off of network latency, as well as whatever is going on with that provider's infrastructure at that point. So yeah, this isn't static in any way, shape, or form. That's part of why I have the latency testers here so that you know what the best one to switch to at that moment is. Alrighty, so the next change that I've made so far is that I've built out the crypto services directory quite a bit more. You can see that we have 13 sections so far. So it's definitely starting to look a bit more well-developed here. We're just going to go down the list quickly. And folks, as I've mentioned before, I'm trying to build this out so it can be a one-stop shop for whatever resources that you might be looking for insofar as links to the real deal for whatever it is that you're looking for. Like for example, with Pancake Swap, I've seen many different fake pancake swaps out there that ultimately turned out to be wallet drainers rather than anything helpful to the user. Crypto is absolutely a bit of a breeding grounds for phishing attacks or any other sort of attack where someone may very well want to rob you of your hard-earned tokens or money. So this service is a way to try and help prevent you from getting swindled in some way. And ultimately, as I've noted before on a couple calls, is I want to build this out to be a sort of crypto beginner survival guide. All right, let me check the chat here real quick. All right, more folks putting in their wallet addresses. That's good. All right, so I'll go ahead and share my screen again, and we'll go back to the main tools page. All right, so the next change is I've added two new pages to the Toolbox sites. The first one we've already seen, the Toolbox sponsors, but I've also added a story page going over a bit of the history of the Toolbox. Going back to when I started this project back on the Blogspot site back in June of 2025. And ultimately rolling through to today, just so you all can see a bit of where we've been and where we are now, especially if you're new to the community and don't know the history of where this tool has been, where the toolbox has been. All right, so the next change I made is a navigation spot here where you can click any one of these section names and it'll automatically take you to that section. Like for example, if I click on calculator, it takes me down to the token value calculator. If I click on switch RPC, it takes me to the RPC switcher section. So this will be a good way of navigating the toolbox in such a way where now we have a navigation system that won't break whenever I decide to add something or change something around anymore. Yay! All right, and there's one last change that I've made, and this is something that only folks using the mobile version of the toolbox will notice, even though it's the exact same page, is I've cleaned up the user interface quite a bit. So if we take a look at a before picture, we can see that this user interface looks quite a bit cluttered. And these buttons that you see here, and as well as the navigation bar and the B&B price ticker, those all follow you wherever you go on the page to the point where that takes up a lot of space on the screen and definitely obscures a lot of what you would be doing. So as for what it looks like now, I don't know about you guys, but I think this looks much cleaner, much cleaner. As you scroll down to the page, the navigation window here will collapse and just the B&B price ticker as well as the website controls will follow you, but now they're definitely out of the way so you can actually see what it is that you're looking at. So I'd say that's a very helpful UX improvements for the mobile side. To be quite honest, I can't believe that I let the old version fester there for so long, but hindsight is 2020 when you're used to using the desktop only. And it's all available at the exact same place that the toolbox has always been, the very same GitHub link. I'll have that in the video description as well. All right, so are there any questions about that before we move on? Anything that we went through for the updates? All righty. And folks, if you just joined us in the last few minutes, we're having a drawing for a wallet security check. So if you have put your wallet address into the chat, now might be a good time to do it. And with that, let me scroll down to my list of topics here. All right, and now we're going to have a quick talk about sustainability and an update on that for the toolbox. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. And Toolbox has gotten a couple donations since I started talking about sustainability, but ultimately it's hasn't really moved the needle too much, unfortunately. And as I mentioned before, we've had one person step up and sponsor the toolbox. I know who that person is. I indeed have reached out to them, and I have thanked them very much for deciding to sponsor the toolbox. So if if you find my tools to be valuable here, folks, then definitely consider either sponsoring it or donating directly through the donation buttons I have here. And some of you may also have noticed if you've been through the Wall of Joy recently, that I've started a public goods campaign, likening my tools to several other public goods that are definitely nice to have across the world, as well as some that we look back on it were really quite essential. Like, for example, with the first post that I made regarding public goods, I mentioned lighthouses. With another post that I have on the docket, we'll be talking about park benches that were put out publicly for the good of the community. Now, my toolbox definitely serves as a public good for our community here, but unfortunately, one thing that all public goods have in common, including my toolbox, is that a great majority of the time they take a bit of upkeep, unfortunately. And that's not just a one-time thing, that's ultimately a recurring thing that ultimately has to happen. Like, for example, for a lighthouse, repairs may have to be made on the structure itself. The bulb may eventually have to be replaced, and in fact, it will eventually have to be replaced. So those are things that some folks just might not really think about because if they see something working perfectly, then they just don't think about it that much unless they really use it. So let me start a bit of a dialogue about that, similar to what I did a few calls before where I talked about this before. Let's see, who do I want to pick on tonight? La, 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 la. Ah. All right, Sherry, can you go ahead and unmute?
Yes, Hunter.
Right, so Sherry, about how many times a week would you say that you drive anywhere?
Um, every second day, at least.
Alrighty. And have you have you ever thought at all about the roads that you drive on?
I
Like I'm
drive
not
on a lot
talking
of.
right, you drive on a lot of roads probably, but yeah, I'm not talking about directions here for anyone confused here. I'm talking about the roads themselves. Do you tend to think about them much at all?
Of course, Hunter. I have to watch out for kangaroos everywhere I drive.
Yeah, there's Australia for you. But ultimately, it also boils down to have you ever thought about how those roads get upkeep? And if it wasn't for taxes that you, of course, have to pay, then what would be paying for any sort of repairs or upkeep on those roads, such as they may be?
Well, if it wasn't for taxes, they probably wouldn't get upgraded, Hunter.
Right, right. And that's ultimately a problem that a lot of Web3 and false infrastructure suffers from. Because you see, if it works perfectly, then you're probably not really thinking about it that much. I mean, you notice that you drive on the roads, you notice that it's a line item in your taxes if you're lucky, but you don't really notice the fact that it's kept up now, do you?
No, that's right. You don't. If it's working fine, you don't think about it.
Mhm. Whereas if we start to see potholes or if we start to see cracks, well, suddenly everyone's an infrastructure expert now, aren't they?
Very true.
And again, this is a very common problem in Web3 as well as free and open source software. And it boils down that everyone is more than happy to use tooling that's available to them. Everyone is more than happy to use resources, but not so happy to try and make sure that those resources and that tooling is kept up.
Yeah, that's
That's a
fair,
pro
I reckon.
Yeah, that's a problem, both in the Web3 space as well as in the free and open source software space. And here we definitely see that problem clear as day as well with my toolbox, unfortunately. I'm a neurostatistic. I am data in the realm of Web3, as it were. And there is absolutely a lot of blame to go around as to why this happens, how it happens, but the lion's share of that blame does ultimately rest on my shoulders because ultimately I'm a victim of my own competence at this. Because for the most parts, my tooling has largely just worked for anyone who uses it, apart from the odd issue here and there. So no one really thinks about the fact that it's kept up. They just notice that it's there. So for anything that requires us to either upkeep the toolbox itself or try to expand it past what our current boundaries allow us to do, then that becomes a problem because then that means no money is coming in. And we touched on this, Sherry, of course, but I just want to have it say it plainly and outright. Uh, as far as the roads are concerned, if there's no money coming into their upkeep, what happens to them?
They're not upkept, Hunter, and everyone starts whinging about it.
Hmm. Yep. And in the best case scenario, you'll find yourself changing your routes, and you might not even notice that anything was wrong until you get to the point where you realize that the routes that you used to take just doesn't exist anymore.
In most cases, I would agree. Yeah.
So again, this is absolutely a problem. And one thing that I've been sounding the alarm on for a bit over 2 months now. I started when the toolbox first began in its original form back in June of 2025 with a sell donation button. And then from there, we've escalated sustainability efforts here and there to the point where we have multiple donation buttons. We have a separate dedicated page for those of you who want to donate something that isn't BNB, USDT, BEP20, or the newest one being Joy. In fact, let me show you all what that looks like. So you can click on the view more donation options button here, or you can click on the navigation bar and go to donation options. And it will either will take you to this page where you have the option to donate some of the most popular coins on several of the most common chains. And even if you have something that's either less popular or isn't Web3 native, then you have an option to use this widget that I have here to donate whether it is that you have that you would like to donate. And what this will do is it will automatically swap it to USDT on the BNB chain. We'll just scroll down to this list here for a moment. And that's not even all the tokens that this widget supports. So we definitely have plenty of options available, and we also have, of course, the sponsorship option, and we also have a couple dedicated products in the marketplace that allow you to donate either 10 USDT worth of Joy or whichever amount that you would decide that you want to donate in Joy. Now, I do have a Joy donation button on the tooling page itself, but some people may decide that they find this just a bit nicer. I'll probably end up replacing that image soonish. But these pages do go into a bit more detail as to what the toolbox is, what it does, and why it's worth keeping up. And I have something similar on the sponsorship page for it as well. All right, so folks, just to be clear, the issue that I've outlined here is not at all a new issue. In fact, this is one of the most common and well-documented issues across all of Web3 and all of free and open source software. So this is definitely not just a me problem. This is a problem with arguably the internet as a whole, as it were, because what we're ultimately seeing here is unfortunate convergence of problems such as the diffusion of responsibility problem, and we're also seeing it as a convergence of the tragedy of the commons. either of which you may have heard about before. So the idea being with the diffusion of responsibility is that ultimately a lot of people, and in fact most people, if not all people, think that someone else will do it. So in the case of the roads, if it was just a matter of them being upkept with donations as well as community fundraising, a majority of the people would probably think that, well, someone else will donate, so I don't have to. But if we have the majority of people thinking that, or in some cases, all the people thinking that, then of course, then the roads get no donations for their upkeep. And yep, then we come back to the same problem. No upkeep, no funds to upkeep means the roads don't get upkept. So that's definitely an issue with diffusion of responsibility. Everyone thinks that someone else will take care of it. And again, unfortunately, this is the case with a lot of Web3 and SPOS in general. And we also see the tragedy of the commons, which is a bit more problem, a bit more common and a bit more well-known. And this essentially points back to the same idea that I brought up a while back, that everyone is happy to use the resource and take from it, whereas much fewer are happy to sort of enrich the resource in any way, shape, or form. To the point where there's just nothing left of the resource after everyone's taken. So to try and fix that, we're going to be launching another project that will be an offshoot of Project Atlas for anyone who remembers that from Operation Pantheon. And what this project will entail is it will entail several more listings on the marketplace, going into detail about each and every element that I'd like to build on the toolbox, as well as each and every funding goal that we'll need to make each of those things happen. Like, for example, we can see one being that, like, well, let me go ahead and share my screen again so you all can see. Now, a lot of you probably noticed at one point or another that I'm using a .github.io subdomain. Now, granted, this works for now, but this really doesn't look very professional, and it really betrays the sort of sense of something being temporary or not all that good, especially if they're a newcomer into the community who's just looking at the toolbox for the first time. They don't know me, don't really care to know about me. So one of my goals for the monthly funding goal is raising it up to ultimately move over to a private domain of some sort. And there's a few that I have my eye on. Most of them are going to involve Hunter's Toolbox is the root domain. Now, what top level domain that I might pick is still definitely up for debate. I'm partial to a couple such as .dev or .tools, but as you can see, there's quite a few options available here. So I'll definitely be spoiled for choice if we can get enough funds raised for this. Although I did note that there are a couple that have been taken so far. I assume that those are just domain names that have been taken by domain name speculators, because I didn't see anything on any of those pages when I took a look. And for those of you who don't know what those are, typically domain names can be registered regardless of anything else that information that you may provide. So in some cases, some people may decide to buy up quite a few domains, mostly on the .com top level domain, and they'll just sit on it and keep paying the renewal fee for a while. And they'll essentially hope at some points that some high roller or some big company will want or need that domain for some reason and be more than willing to pay out the nose to get it from them. Now, that's definitely arguably its own separate problem across the internet, but definitely one that's way beyond the scope of anything I talk about here. So we're not going to talk about that, although I will say that most of the time these domain name speculators tend to keep to top level domains such as the .com or .net subdom top level domains, I mean, because hey, those are the most popular, those are the most recognizable. So it makes sense that we see the most activity there. And ultimately, that's just one of the things that I'd like to build the toolbox out to be. Another thing that comes to mind is ultimately the gas station wall that we brought up to start this call out with. That's a part of the project as well, albeit as sort of a pilot sort of thing to see how the community responds to it. Another thing that I want to build is a VPS to host a site on, or rather, probably just rent it from somewhere. And another thing I'm probably on the fence on at this point because I can definitely see some pros and cons to it, is a private AI for folks use to answer their questions when they're on asleep, hopefully in a bid to help out the executive team as well as myself as well, because folks, for those of you who don't know, I'm Generation Z. I'm a digital native, and many might argue terminally online. But it's a sad fact of life that people have to sleep eventually, and I'm no different in that respect. So we want to give people more of a chance to get help at any time of day or night whenever they need help, especially if the executive team is busy with other folks. I'm busy with someone else, or if any one of us is asleep for that matter. Now, will this be as good as having actual one-on-one human help? No. AI simply cannot do that job as of yet. As much as we would like to, some folks would like to claim differently. But it will absolutely be better than nothing, a lot better than nothing. And that's what we're looking at. If the executives are busy, I'm busy, or I'm asleep, or you need help with something in particular that the executives just might not help you with, or they might not know about themselves. But I can definitely see the cons as far as that goes as well, because then that means that you're trusting something that could absolutely make a mistake, and AI absolutely does make mistakes quite a bit. I've seen quite a few humorous mistakes made by AI when I've used it, and this has been the case across many different providers. I've seen this to be the case with ChatGPT. I've seen this to be the case with Quen. I've seen this to be the case with Claude, with Grok, with Kimmy, and with DeepSeek. And that's just scratching the surface, really. So there's definitely a sound debate and a sound question to be asked there, because there's going to be some users that are going to trust everything that the AI tells them as gospel. We know this because we see this all over the news at this point. So there's definitely a sound debate to be had there, and I'm definitely on the fence as to whether I'm going to go through with that idea or not. But in any case, ultimately, all this boils down to is the toolbox is approaching the limits of what it can do with free backing without much in the way of resources supporting it. And that's definitely an issue if we want the toolbox to grow further. I want to grow further. I hope you all want to grow further too and help you all out even more. Would anyone like to argue the point that we shouldn't have the toolbox grow further? All right, no takers. Am I doing my job too well again, folks? All righty. So with that, we'll go ahead and move on to the next and last section. It's a Q&A section, and this is essentially open season for anything that's been on you all's mind regarding my toolbox, regarding anything in the pool playing ecosystem, or for that matter, anything regarding anything in crypto in general. It's open season. Let me go ahead and check the chat. Alrighty, so if there aren't any questions, does anyone have any comments about anything we've gone through today? No? Alrighty then, we'll go ahead and start the closeout ritual. Does anyone think I'll get it right this time? Alrighty. 3, 2, 1. To the moon!
Oh,
Pizza!
to the east.
No! Well,
To the
you heard it,
moon.
folks. Two Pizza Huts. Ah, dear. Alrighty, I'll go ahead and stop the recording before I make more of a fool of myself.